Welcome back to Zarela HOA Stories. Drop your country and city name in comments. Chapter 1: The Garden of Defiance. Emily Scott's front yard was her sanctuary. A patchwork of vibrant flowers, roses, sunflowers, and wild violets, thrive under the gentle touch of her gardening gloves. It wasn't just a garden, it was a piece of her heart. She had worked tirelessly, spending hours pulling weeds, watering, and nurturing her little slice of color. To her, the bright reds and purples weren't just flowers, they were a testament to freedom, to life in its purest form. As she kneels by the garden's edge, tucking a sunflower stalk into the soft soil, she hears footsteps behind her. Slowly, she stands up, brushing the dirt from her hands. She looks over her shoulder, meeting the icy stare of Karen Turner, the neighborhood's self-appointed rule enforcer. "Nice garden," Karen sneers, her tone far from complimentary. "But you know it's against the HOA guidelines, right?" Emily's heart skips. The Homeowners Association had always been a presence in their community, but it had never been this direct with her. Not like this. She takes a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "I didn't think flowers could break rules," Emily replies, trying to sound casual. Karen's lips tighten into a thin line. "You're in violation. HOA rules state that gardens must use neutral or pastel colors. Your creative choices are a bit too much for this neighborhood." A flicker of anger ignites in Emily's chest. "This is my home, Karen. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just breaking the rules," Karen interrupts sharply. "And if you don't fix it, you'll face fines, Emily. Big fines." Emily straightens up, her fists clenching. "I'm not going to change my garden. I'll gladly pay a fine if it comes to that." Karen eyes her with disdain, but there's something almost gleeful in her expression. "You'll regret it. Trust me, I've already talked to Gary. It's only a matter of time." With a final glance at the garden, Karen turns and walks away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Emily stands frozen, the weight of the confrontation settling in. Karen's words echo in her mind, and suddenly, the bright flowers seem to lose some of their vibrancy. Later that afternoon, as Emily waters the garden, Jason, her husband, steps outside. He stretches, looking at the flowers, then at Emily. His smile fades when he notices her tense expression. "Everything okay?" Jason asks, walking over to her. "Karen came by," Emily says, her voice tight. "She wants me to tear up the garden." Jason raises an eyebrow. "What?" Emily nods. "She says it's against the HOA rules. Pastels only, apparently." Jason rubs his forehead. "Are you serious? For flowers? This is ridiculous." "I'm not tearing it up, Jason. It's my garden. My home." Emily's voice hardens with resolve. Jason hesitates, glancing back at the house. "I get it. But you know how they are. They'll come for us with fines. Or worse." "I'm not scared of them," Emily snaps, the frustration boiling over. "We bought this house. I'm not letting anyone, especially Karen, tell me what I can or can't do with my own yard." Jason sighs, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but there's got to be a way to fix this without making things worse. Maybe we can negotiate with the HOA." Emily shakes her head. "No more negotiations. They're trying to control everything. If we give in now, who knows what they'll do next? We fight." Jason looks at her, the uncertainty in his eyes slowly melting into admiration. He nods. "All right. Let's fight." The next morning, Emily receives a letter in the mail. Her fingers tremble slightly as she tears it open, reading the harsh words printed on the paper. "This is your formal warning regarding the violation of HOA rules concerning your garden. You have 10 days to remove all flowers that do not adhere to our guidelines or face fines." The letter feels like a slap across the face. They were serious. She looks over at Jason, who is already staring at her with a concerned expression. She clenches her fists, the paper crinkling in her hand. Fine, she mutters under her breath. Let's see how they like fighting back. Emily walks over to the computer, quickly opening the HOA website. She scrolls through the guidelines, eyes scanning the fine print for loopholes, for anything that might help her fight this ridiculous rule. Her fingers hover over the keyboard as she types out an email. Dear HOA President Gary Holloway, I am writing to contest the warning I received regarding my garden. I have carefully read the guidelines, and there is no explicit rule stating that flowers must be pastel or neutral in color. I would like to request a meeting to discuss this matter further. She hits send with a sense of triumph. She wasn't going to back down. This was more than just about flowers, it was about standing up for herself, her home, and her freedom. Later that evening, as Emily and Jason relax in the living room, there's a knock at the door. Jason opens it, his face falling when he sees the figure standing on the doorstep. Karen. I thought I made myself clear earlier, Emily, Karen says, her voice dripping with venom. You didn't listen to my warning. And now you'll have to pay the consequences. Before Emily can respond, Karen holds up a stack of papers, official-looking documents. I've filed a complaint with the HOA, and they've already scheduled a hearing. This isn't just a small fine anymore, Emily. You've crossed the line. Emily feels a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was war. As Karen walks away, she turns with a smirk. The HOA doesn't lose, you know. Not to people like you. Chapter 2, The War Begins. The morning after Karen's threat, Emily can't shake the feeling of being watched. As she steps outside, she glances nervously at the neighbors' homes. It's as if every pair of eyes is waiting for her to make a mistake. The letter from the HOA is still crumpled in her hand, and her stomach churns as she rereads the fine print. Failure to comply will result in additional fines, and further violations will lead to legal action. Jason, his face drawn, steps outside and joins her on the porch. What now? He asks, his voice quiet but heavy. I'm not backing down, Emily says, her voice hard. This is my home. If they think I'm going to let Karen or anyone else tell me what I can do in my own garden, they're wrong. Jason sighs, rubbing his temple. I get it, Emily. But this is the HOA we're talking about. They can drag this out for months. Fines will pile up, and then it'll turn into something worse. It won't just be about the garden anymore. They'll start finding things we didn't even know were a problem. Emily knows he's right. The HOA is powerful. They've controlled the neighborhood for years with their strict rules and impossible expectations. But she can't bring herself to give in. The thought of changing her garden, of removing the flowers she's worked so hard to grow, feels like giving up on everything she stands for. Her home. Her life. Her choices. I'll fight this, Emily says, her eyes fixed on the garden. I don't care what it takes. A few hours later, Emily sits at the kitchen table, typing out an email to Gary Holloway, the HOA president. She knows she needs to be careful. No harsh words, no accusations, just a formal request for clarification. She sends it off with a feeling of finality, as if one simple email could change everything. Jason comes into the room, holding a cup of coffee. You know this won't be easy, right? We're not the only ones Karen's got under her thumb. Emily's eyes meet his. I don't care. I'm not letting her get away with this. The next day, Emily receives a response. Gary Holloway's email is cold and impersonal. We have reviewed your garden and, as stated in the HOA guidelines, your flower choices violate our color policy. You are given 10 days to make adjustments. Failure to comply will result in a fine. The matter is non-negotiable. She reads it twice, her hands trembling. There's no room for discussion. No chance to appeal. They've made their decision. She slams the laptop shut, frustration boiling in her chest. They're not even giving me a chance, Emily mutters, pacing the living room. Just fine after fine, until I'm forced to tear everything down. Jason stands silently in the doorway, his arms crossed. I told you it wouldn't be easy. This isn't just about a garden. It's about power. And Karen has it. Emily stops pacing and faces him. I won't let her control me. I can't. This is my home. Jason rubs his face. I get it. But maybe we should talk to some of the neighbors. Get a sense of where they stand. If this turns into a neighborhood-wide thing, we need to know who's with us. Emily hesitates, but then nods. You're right. We can't do this alone. That evening, Emily and Jason walk through the neighborhood, knocking on doors. At first, the response is predictable. Neighbors are hesitant, polite but distant, giving half-hearted responses when Emily mentions the garden dispute. But then, at number 17, Frank, the retired man who's lived here longer than anyone, lets them in. He's always kept to himself, sitting on his porch reading the newspaper, but there's something different about him tonight. I know what Karen's up to, Frank says, his voice low and careful. She's been pushing this HOA stuff for years. Trying to control everything. She thinks she's in charge. Emily's eyes widen. You've had problems with her too? Frank nods. She got into a fight with my daughter over something stupid. The HOA backed her up, and we ended up paying fines for a fence that didn't even need to be changed. Jason frowns. So, what happened? She won, Frank says quietly. But I've been watching. Karen gets what she wants. And when she doesn't, she makes sure everyone knows about it. I've learned to stay quiet. It's easier that way. Emily's heart races. But if we stay quiet, nothing changes. Karen gets to control everything. We can't let her keep getting away with it. Frank looks at her, his eyes full of something close to regret. I've seen too many people try. They end up getting worn down, losing everything. But, he pauses, lowering his voice even more. I'm tired of it. You're right. Someone has to stand up to her. Are you with us? Emily asks, her voice filled with hope. Frank's face softens. I'll support you. I don't know how much good it'll do, but I'll help. Emily smiles, her heart swelling with a small victory. Thank you. You don't know how much this means. As they leave Frank's house, Emily's mind is racing. She's not alone. Frank, at least, is on their side. But how many more neighbors are out there who feel the same way? And if they can get enough support, maybe they can challenge Karen's control over the HOA. But as they turn the corner, a familiar car drives past, Karen's. She's behind the wheel, her eyes narrowing as she sees them. Emily feels a shiver run down her spine. Karen knows what they're up to. And she won't stop until she's won. Chapter 3, The Breaking Point. Emily stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the letter in her hand. The HOA's latest threat had arrived that morning, louder, more aggressive. They had warned her again, immediate removal of the flowers is required. Further violations will result in legal action. She could almost hear Karen's voice in her head, laced with the same smug satisfaction she'd seen in the neighborhood meetings. The HOA was no longer about a garden. It was personal. And Emily wasn't about to back down. Jason, Emily said, her voice calm but laced with an anger she was trying to keep under control. They want me to rip out the garden by tomorrow. Or they'll take us to court. Jason, sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, glanced up at her, his face drawn. Emily, this is getting out of hand. I know, she snapped. But I'm not giving in. Jason leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. We can't just ignore it. We're going to get buried in fines. They're not going to stop. If we keep fighting this, we'll end up losing everything. Emily felt the weight of his words, but she shook her head. I'd rather lose everything than give in. It's my home. My garden. Jason stood up, walking over to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but filled with concern. I get it. But I don't want to see you destroyed by this. I don't want to watch them tear us apart. Emily pulled away, her voice rising. I'm not letting them tear me apart, Jason. They want to control everything, what we plant, what we do, what we say. I'm not going to let them win. Not like this. Jason stared at her, frustration and worry in his eyes. So, what now? What's your plan? Because right now, it's just you and me against an entire system. I'll talk to Frank, she said, her voice steady now. He said he'd help us. Maybe he knows something we can use against them. Jason hesitated. Frank's just one guy. What can he do? He's been here longer than anyone, Emily said. If he knows anything about how the HOA works, we need to hear it. Jason sighed. All right. Let's talk to him. But, Emily, we have to be smart about this. We can't just go in swinging. We need a plan. That afternoon, Emily and Jason walked down the street to Frank's house. The sun was beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows over the neighborhood. As they approached Frank's porch, he was sitting in his usual chair, his cane resting beside him. His eyes softened when he saw them, and he waved them over. I didn't think you'd be back so soon, Frank said with a chuckle. What's going on? Emily took a deep breath. We're not backing down, Frank. The HOA is trying to force us to take down the garden. And now, they're threatening to take us to court. Frank's expression darkened, and he gestured for them to sit. They're really coming after you, huh? This isn't the first time they've done something like this. But you're right to stand your ground. This is your home, not theirs. Emily looked at him, her hope rising. Then why does it feel like we're fighting a losing battle? Frank leaned forward, lowering his voice. Because the HOA has power. They've controlled this neighborhood for years. People don't fight back. They don't even know how. But there's one thing I can tell you. Emily and Jason both leaned in. Frank's eyes narrowed. Gary Holloway. The HOA president. He's not as clean as he looks. He's been taking kickbacks from contractors. He's been using his position to line his pockets. But it's not something you can just go around shouting about. You need proof. Without it, you'll just end up looking like you're out for revenge. Emily's mind raced. Kickbacks? Proof, how do we find that? Frank hesitated. I don't have all the details, but I've seen enough to know that Gary's been involved in shady deals. There's a storage shed at the back of the HOA office. I've seen him meet with contractors there late at night. I don't know what's in there, but it's worth looking into. Jason's eyes widened. You think there's something illegal in that shed? I don't know for sure, Frank said. But I've been around long enough to recognize when something isn't right. If you're serious about fighting this, that's your next move. Emily's pulse quickened. This was it. This could be the key they needed to bring down the HOA, to expose Karen and Gary for what they really were. But it wasn't going to be easy. Getting into the shed, finding the evidence, it would take guts, and they'd have to be careful. All right, Emily said, standing up. We'll do it. Jason looked at her, concern still clouding his features. Are you sure? This could backfire. I'm sure, she replied. We need to hit them where it hurts. If we can expose their corruption, the HOA will lose its power. And Karen, she won't have any ground to stand on. Later that evening, as the last light of day faded, Emily and Jason found themselves in front of the HOA office. The building was quiet, the parking lot empty. A single light flickered above the door. Do you have the keys? Jason asked in a low voice, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Emily nodded. Gary gave me a copy when we moved in. We're going to use it to get inside. Frank said the shed is in the back. They approached the office cautiously, their footsteps muted on the gravel. Emily inserted the key into the door, and the lock clicked open. The two of them stepped inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. Emily's heart raced. This was it. This was their chance to take down Karen, Gary, and the entire corrupt HOA. She motioned for Jason to follow as they moved toward the back of the building. Chapter 4: Revenge in Bloom. The shed was quieter than Emily expected. The only sound was the soft rustle of the wind against the trees, as if the world around them was holding its breath. She and Jason stood in front of the locked door, hearts pounding in their chests. The key felt cold in Emily's hand as she carefully slid it into the lock, the click echoing louder than it should. "Are you sure about this?" Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. Emily nodded, her fingers shaking but determined. "We have no choice. This is the only way to expose them." The lock turned. The door creaked open. Inside, the shed was dark, the air thick with the scent of dust and old wood. Emily squinted, trying to make out the shadows. There were boxes stacked against the walls, piles of paper, and old furniture covered with dusty sheets. But there was something off about the place, something that didn't feel right. Jason took a cautious step inside. "This doesn't look like anything special." "Look for anything unusual," Emily whispered, her voice tense. "Anything that could give us a clue." They began to move through the shed, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. Emily's eyes scanned the boxes and papers, but nothing jumped out at her. She felt like they were searching for a needle in a haystack. Then, at the far corner of the shed, something caught her eye. A metal filing cabinet, pushed back against the wall, its drawers slightly ajar. Emily's pulse quickened. This was it. The evidence they needed. "Jason," Emily whispered urgently. "Over here." Jason hurried over to her, his face pale under the dim light. "What is it?" "I think we found it," Emily said, her fingers already tugging at the drawer. It slid open with a small squeak, revealing a stack of documents. She pulled them out, her hands trembling as she flipped through them. The papers were full of names, contractors, dates, payments. And in the corner of one sheet, there it was. A receipt for a bribe paid to Gary Holloway. Her stomach churned. This was it. This was the proof they needed. "Look at this," Emily said, showing the paper to Jason. "Gary's been taking kickbacks." Jason's eyes widened as he scanned the document. This could take down the whole HOA. Emily felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. As they stared at the document, the sound of footsteps outside the shed grew louder. Someone was approaching. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Someone was coming. "Quick, hide!" Jason hissed. They scrambled to move behind a stack of old chairs, holding their breath as the footsteps grew louder. Through the crack in the door, Emily saw a shadow move past, and her blood ran cold. It was Karen. "Did you hear that?" Karen's voice rang out, sharp and demanding. "I swear I heard something back here." Emily's eyes locked with Jason's. They couldn't be caught now. Not with the evidence in their hands. The door creaked open, and Emily held her breath, praying Karen wouldn't notice them. She pressed herself against the cold wood of the shed, her back stiff, trying not to make a sound. Karen's shadow loomed in the doorway for what felt like an eternity. Then, with a frustrated huff, Karen stepped back, slamming the door behind her. Emily let out the breath she had been holding. She was shaking, her body still tensed from the close call. "We need to get out of here," Jason said urgently, clutching the papers in his hand. "Now." Emily nodded. She reached for the door, but as her fingers brushed the handle, she froze. Someone else was coming. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. "Someone's coming in the front," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "We need another way out." Jason's eyes darted around the shed, then he spotted a small window at the back, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. "I'll go first," he said, moving quickly toward it. Wait, Emily said, grabbing his arm. Be careful. If we get caught. I know, Jason said, his voice tight. But we don't have a choice. We have to go now. Emily hesitated for a second, then nodded. Jason quickly climbed onto a stack of crates, pushing the window open. He looked back at Emily. I'm through. It's clear. Emily followed him, squeezing through the small opening. The cool night air hit her like a slap, but there was no time to relax. They had to get out of there, fast. Once outside, they ran toward the fence, their feet pounding on the ground. As they reached the edge of the property, Emily stopped. She glanced over her shoulder. The HOA office loomed in the distance, but the shed was still in their line of sight. We have the proof, Emily said breathlessly, holding up the papers. We can take this to the police. This could end everything. Jason didn't answer immediately. He was still looking back at the shed, his face pale. We need to be careful. If Karen or Gary finds out we have this. They won't, Emily said, her voice firm. They won't know it was us. We're going to make sure of that. Just as they turned to leave, the distant sound of a car engine rumbled in the background. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She stopped dead in her tracks. The car was heading straight for the HOA office. The headlights flickered in the darkness, and as the car neared, Emily recognized the silhouette behind the wheel. It was Gary. Jason, Emily whispered, her heart racing. We need to go. Now. They turned and sprinted down the street, the adrenaline pushing them faster than they'd ever run before. Chapter 5, The Ultimate Twist. The next morning, Emily sat at the kitchen table, the evidence spread out before her. The papers, the receipts, the names, everything was in her hands now. Gary's involvement in the bribe was clear. But the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. She had what she needed to destroy the HOA, to expose the truth. But what if they weren't ready to fight back? What if Gary already knew they were coming for him? Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone and dialed Frank's number. Hello? Frank's voice came through, low and tired. Frank, we've got it. We've got the evidence on Gary. But I'm not sure what to do next. He's dangerous. Frank paused for a long moment. I knew it, he muttered. He's been up to no good for years. But getting that kind of proof? That's huge. But you need to be careful, Emily. Gary will fight back, and he won't fight fair. I know, she said, her voice tight. That's why I need your help. We can't just take this to the police right now. Not without backup. All right, Frank said, his voice firming up. I'll help you. But it has to be done right. We don't want to tip him off before we're ready. As the day wore on, Emily and Jason made plans. They couldn't just walk into the police station and hand over the evidence. If they did, they might find themselves in deeper trouble than they were already in. They needed a strategy. They needed to make sure that they had the full weight of the neighborhood behind them. By the time evening fell, the neighborhood felt different, quiet, like the calm before a storm. Emily stood on her porch, looking down the street. The same houses, the same familiar faces, but nothing was the same anymore. The HOA had turned their lives upside down. And now, Emily was ready to turn it back. Jason joined her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Emily nodded. We've come this far. We can't stop now. The plan was simple. Emily and Jason would meet Frank at his house, and together, they would contact the right people, lawyers, local media, anyone who could help them expose the corruption in the HOA. But as Emily grabbed her jacket and started toward the door, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. You've made a mistake, Emily. You should have stayed quiet. Now it's too late. Her stomach dropped. Jason, she said, her voice tight. We need to go. Now. At Frank's house, the three of them gathered around the kitchen table. The papers were laid out, ready to go. Frank had already made calls to a few trusted contacts, people who could help them turn the evidence into something real, something that could bring the HOA down. I've got people ready to go, Frank said, his voice low and steady. But we need to be quick. Once they realize we've got this, they'll make sure we don't get far. Emily nodded, her mind racing. She thought of Karen's smug face, of Gary's quiet, threatening demeanor. They would stop at nothing. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, the sound of tires screeching to a halt outside made them all freeze. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the window and peeked out, her breath catching in her throat. A black SUV was parked at the end of the street. Two figures stepped out. Emily recognized them immediately, Gary and Karen. They're here, Emily whispered, panic rising in her chest. What do we do now? Jason asked, his voice tense. Hide the papers, Frank said urgently. They can't know we have it. Not yet. Emily quickly shoved the documents into a drawer, locking it. They couldn't afford to get caught with the evidence now. But she knew that hiding wasn't going to solve anything. They couldn't keep running. Not anymore. We need to confront them, Emily said, her voice shaking with determination. Are you crazy? Jason asked, his eyes wide. That's exactly what they want. They'll crush you if you try to confront them. But Emily didn't back down. We have to. If we let them control this, we lose everything. The neighborhood, our lives. This is our chance to take back control. Outside, Gary and Karen were approaching Frank's door. Emily's pulse raced. The time had come. We need to act now, she said, her voice firm. We can't wait any longer. If they find out we're trying to expose them, they'll destroy us, Jason finished, his voice filled with dread. I don't know if we can win this. Emily turned to him, her eyes sharp. We've already won. We have the proof. We just have to make them believe it. With one last glance at the papers locked away in the drawer, Emily stepped toward the door. Let's go. As they opened the front door, Gary and Karen were standing just a few feet away. The moment their eyes locked, Emily felt the tension surge between them. Gary smiled, a cold, calculated smile. I knew you'd come, Emily, he said, his voice smooth as silk. But you've made a mistake. You don't know who you're messing with. Emily stood tall, her heart racing but her voice steady. I know exactly who I'm messing with. And you're going down, Gary. You and the entire HOA. Karen's eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're up against. Emily didn't flinch. I know everything I need to. And so do the neighbors. This is over. Gary's smile faded, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. But it didn't last long. His composure returned almost immediately. This isn't over, he said, his voice dangerously low. You've made a lot of enemies, Emily. And you'll regret it. As the door slammed shut behind them, Emily felt a wave of unease wash over her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If you like our video, then make sure to like and subscribe our channel. Thanks, we will back in next video.